Hello! Welcome to Wichita State University's Deaf Sensitivity Training for Police Officers. My name is Kelly Adams. I am a sign language interpreter here at Wichita State University. This training series is comprised of 5 short videos designed to provide information and methods for effectively communicating with the deaf and hard of hearing population. The series includes information on demographics and culture, diversity within the deaf community, communication do's and don'ts, ASL Lesson 1 and ASL Lesson 2. Welcome to Part 1 of Deaf Sensitivity Training. Today we will focus on some basic demographic information. You might be wondering what the chances are of actually encountering a deaf and hard of hearing person here on campus. So let's take a look at some basic demographic information. Out of the 300 million citizens here in the United States, about 20 million have a hearing loss. Of those 20 million, 7 out of every 10,000 are prelingually deaf, never having acquired a spoken language. Instead, most of these citizens use American Sign Language as their primary language and written English as a secondary language. They regard themselves as a cultural minority belonging to the deaf community. Here at Wichita State University, we have deaf instructors, students, parents of students, and community members who utilize sign language interpreting services for accessing communication. At some time in your career, it is likely that you will end up having an encounter with a deaf or hard of hearing individual. To increase the safety of the deaf population, as well as the safety of police officers, it will be necessary to consider deaf culture to develop a better understanding of the lives of people who are deaf and hard of hearing. We will take a look at appropriate and inappropriate labels, the predominant language used within the deaf community, social norms, deaf art, and mental health barriers. Deaf culture is a unique culture and linguistic minority who share beliefs, values, and experiences while using American Sign Language as its primary language. The people who share this cherished culture also share the experience of oppression. One small factor of their oppression has simply been from the various offensive labels that the clinical profession has attached to them throughout history. This might lead you to ask, what are the appropriate terms to use when referring to this population? People belonging to the deaf community prefer to be referred to as deaf. When this word is written in English, it uses a capital D to signify that belonging. If this word is used in a general way to refer to all people with a hearing loss, regardless of cultural affiliation, it is written with a lowercase d. Some people with hearing loss who primarily use oral communication, or those who use a combination of oral and signed communication, prefer to be called hard of hearing. It is becoming more common to combine these labels together and use the term deaf or hard of hearing. The labels that are most offensive include the following: hearing impaired, hearing disabled, deaf-mute, and deaf-dumb. Most culturally deaf citizens do not perceive themselves as disabled or impaired, as they are able to function on an even playing field as their hearing citizens. People who are deaf cherish their culture, and the core of their culture is their language, American Sign Language, often abbreviated as ASL. ASL is manually produced, containing highly visual elements, and is not English like most people assume. ASL has federal recognition as well as some states' recognition as a foreign language. It has different grammatical features and syntax structure in comparison to English. A basic sentence in ASL usually has the following structure: time, object, subject, and verb. The most important features of ASL are facial expression, body language, and eye contact, as these make up 60% of the language. Vocal tone and inflection are extremely difficult, if at all possible, for deaf and hard of hearing people to perceive, so face and body are used to portray that same information in a visual way. People who do not know ASL have at times misunderstood a deaf person's mood based on their highly visual facial expression and body language. ASL also requires physical touch at times and is completely necessary if communicating with a person who is deaf-blind. As mentioned before, most people within the deaf community learned written English as a second language. A large number of them were either born deaf or lost their hearing before acquiring any spoken English. Therefore, they may not be fluent in reading or writing English, as they have never had the opportunity to hear the language. As a consequence, most deaf children graduate school with a reading level between 4th to 8th grade. It is important to note that a deaf person's reading or writing ability is not indicative of their intelligence. Unfortunately, several deaf people were deprived of language during their childhood simply because their families never learned sign language. In fact, some deaf people have never had a full and meaningful conversation with any of their family members. This has left them isolated and unaware of many of the basic life lessons that most hearing children learn from home. For this reason, many deaf children ask to live at their state's school for the deaf, as they are able to freely access all communication in an atmosphere where everyone knows sign language. Immigration also plays a part in communication barriers for deaf children, as the children's parents may not know English or sign language and therefore are unable to use written communication with their deaf child. Due to some of the reasons previously mentioned, people who are deaf or hard of hearing experience mental health issues. In fact, according to several research studies, deaf individuals are 2 to 3 times more likely than their hearing peers to experience social-emotional difficulties. Furthermore, research also indicates that certain personality disorders and childhood behaviors are 3 to 6 times more prevalent in deaf individuals, according to the National Deaf Center on Post-Secondary Outcomes. This is due to several factors, including language deprivation, isolation, and a lack of access to appropriate treatment. Oftentimes, an interpreter is not available during a person's entire stay in a treatment facility. So while their hearing peers are participating in constant treatment activities, the deaf person is dependent on the availability of an interpreter. Many treatment physicians and facilitators also have no knowledge of deaf culture, which leaves the deaf patient at a disadvantage. Mental health issues among the deaf population are often untreated. If you encounter a deaf person struggling with mental health, it might be helpful to share the Deaf Crisis Line video phone number, 321-800-3323. Another important factor of deaf culture is its social norms and behaviors. For the most part, living a deaf life is similar to living a life with the ability to hear. Of course, there are a few differences, and we will discuss those next. Historically, deaf people were unable to stay abreast of current local and world events due to the fact that TVs did not have closed captioning and other helpful technologies had not yet been invented. This caused a dire need for people within the community to congregate and rely on each other for information sharing. Deaf people tend to share their personal information with each other in an effort to help others who may face similar issues. Therefore, unlike the hearing population who live in an individualistic society, deaf people adhere to the social norms of collectivism. People who are deaf also tend to be very straightforward and blunt. It is not uncommon for them to comment about one's weight and/or physical appearance, whether it be positive or negative. This is due to their language being quite literal, as well as their main method of perceiving the world being visual. When attempting to gain each other's attention, deaf people will use non-auditory methods like waving, tapping a shoulder, stomping on the floor, or banging on a table to create vibrations, or flashing the overhead lights. Due to ASL's visual nature, deaf people use exaggerated facial expressions that serve as actual grammar. Often, people misinterpret their facial expressions and assume they are upset, when in reality, it is simply part of their language. Deaf people also touch each other while conversating in an effort to clearly describe certain concepts, as well as hugging each other for greetings and parting ways. Deaf arts play an important role in the lives of many deaf people, as they have a serious need to express themselves since the world has placed so many restrictions on their ability to communicate openly with others. Today, we will look at two types of deaf art, Devia and deaf slam poetry. The artwork here was drawn by a famous deaf artist, Chuck Baird. It shows a person signing the word art. Please watch this short video about deaf slam poetry.
Poetry for deaf people is a new form of creativity. Most of my work, most of my poems I've created on my own, in my original work. Spoken poetry and visual poetry are opposite to each other here. You can hear the repetition and whatever else in the voice and the cadence of spoken poetry, but visual poetry uses this fully three-dimensional space, and the rhythm is more in the movements. ASL Slam, I feel, really provides something for the deaf community to be able to socialize and interact, to be able to learn, and to be able to express themselves. would like to expose deaf and hearing people to this art form and show them that ASL is a sophisticated language.
Wichita State University and the Department of Disability Services thank you for your participation in today's deaf sensitivity training. And Shonda, thank you for participating with us. We hope you enjoyed the presentation and learned something that will help maintain the safety of all people on campus.